Welcome to Bunch Formation, your newest favorite college football show. I am Chris Vannini, and I am back from vacation, ready to rehash our debate on lakes versus oceans.
I am David Ubben, and Chris looking well-baked after vacation. While Chris is on vacation for a week, I'm making 2 visits to spring practice at NC State and South Carolina. Built different, Chris. Some of us are just built different, man. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, you're doing work, visiting football teams. We'll talk about that. Real quick, on the lakes versus oceans again, I was Team Lake. I think you were Team Ocean. I spent a week at Dauphin Island, just south of Mobile on the Gulf. And it's an ocean there, obviously the Gulf, but I'm still Team Lake. It's water's usually warmer, less wavy, you can do more stuff. So
why do you want it less wavy? You want it more wavy. The waves is like the whole thing.
It depends what you're doing. Like we at our place up in Canada, we have a jet ski, and you can't really use that thing when it's too wavy. Go tubing.
Yes, you can. So. That's what makes it thrilling.
No, you got to get some speed up. If you're just
you can get speed. What is a jet ski experience if not a little bit dangerous? Like you might die.
Well, like Ricky Bobby, I like to go fast. But
exactly.
Good to be back.
Also, Chris, this is this is spoken like a man who has never caught a wave on a surfboard. That's crazy.
No, I did a high school band trip to Hawaii one time, and we did surfing lessons. But I had a broken ankle, which I had broken playing hockey like a week prior. So I'm a big, boogie board body surf guy. I did some of that this weekend, but have not gotten up on the surfboard with that broken ankle. Good to be back. We got a lot to catch up on, lots to talk about, mostly football. We got some mixed response in the basketball talk the last couple of weeks. Appreciate all the feedback on that. We got some positive and negative. So we appreciate all the feedback. What you guys like and don't like on the show, please let us know. We really appreciate the people who sent us a couple of messages on the TV situations at the bars they were at, specifically Tony Glover on Threads, Connor Johnstone on Twitter. Some of the setups that these guys were dealing with. Hold on. Some of the setups these guys were dealing with, I got to say.
That's criminal.
Chris, we need to take a brief Tunes Bar in Wrigleyville, Chicago. Okay, I was in Chicago for the first weekend of the tournament. We went there. It is very close to one of my college roommates' homes. The guys that were operating the TV at Tunes Bar, it was unbelievable. They were zipping and bopping and hitting the audio. It was like watching art in motion. I could not have felt more privileged. Because listen, if we're talking degree of difficulty, the NCAA tournament, it really might be the most difficult test of a sports bar. Because a college football day, you're going to have to change the channel every 4 hours or so and just leave it. Kind of just, the biggest game gets the audio, all that stuff. No. In the tournament, whatever the people want to watch is coming down to the wire. Duke Siena was happening when we were in that bar. Like, these guys were changing the screens at perfect times, switching off the active games. The audio was switching. It was a virtuoso performance. So while I had some terrible experiences during football, it's you got to shout out the people that do it well. So Tunes Bar in Wrigleyville in Chicago, which also, most importantly, does have a very nice Golden Tee machine in the back of the bar. I did play, I think, 18, 36 holes, something like that. And this Golden Tee machine has the most courses I've ever seen on a Golden Tee machine in my life. Okay. So Tunes Bar, I don't want to rip on the places that are terrible, even though they are many. But when they do well, Tunes Bar in Wrigleyville, thank you for your service. Incredible work from those guys.
Okay, remember, we're going to grade the bars that we on this show experience. I did, though. I forgot what it's called, but I did one in Chicago. It was okay. I think we're going out of 10. It was 10 or 5. I don't remember, but we're going to go 10. Tunes, you're going to give a 12 out of 10 here. Based on what you're saying,
unbelievable
I think that makes sense.
And also, so the guys running it were all like older, middle-aged men, like working the bar, doing the waiter, waiting on tables. And it seemed to be like a 3-man operation. We got our food fast. We were getting refills. They're flipping the these people should be running the government, honestly. Like, it was incredible. They had to have backgrounds at Chick-fil-A or something. I don't know how they were doing this.
for any listeners who don't remember, David had a rant about this during football season, and it blew up on like TikTok. It got like 1 million views, and Instagram, and we got sports bars like posting about it, saying that they handle things well. So this is a bit on the show. We're gonna grade these bars that do a good job or bad job that we experience. So shout out to Tunes in Wrigleyville. Also on this podcast, we'll have a lot coming up in the coming weeks. Spring football previews, questions, reactions. We got some more coach interviews in the bank. We recorded one of those while I was on vacation, so you'll see that on the feed pretty soon. And if you haven't checked out the show notes, we got timestamps in there if you want to jump ahead. Send all your feedback to bunchformationpod@gmail.com and bunchformation on all your social medias. We read every 5-star review on the show. And we have a new review. Came a couple of weeks ago, but it wasn't a good time to talk about it. We got a 1-star review. The first or second one. I think we may have gotten one after the Connor Stallions interview. But we got one here from SMD205, who says simply, Ubben, unbearably soft. SAWFT. I have no idea what it's about. SMD, if you're listening, please email us, bunchformationpod@gmail.com. Tell us why Ubben is soft.
Should probably stop repeating the acronym just for heads up.
Okay. And tell us why. Tell us why Ubben is soft, because we want to get on him.
Yeah, I'm curious. I don't know.
I
I feel like I have many things. I don't know if soft is one of them. Maybe my daughter wrote this review after I caved and gave her some candy or something. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Also, it dropped us from a perfect 5.0 to a 4.9. So SMD, we would love to customer feedback, fix your solution, send you a new copy or something. So let us know. And please, everybody, if you're listening, leave us a 5-star review and a written review, or on Spotify too. It really helps the show as we continue. We're coming up on a year, coming up on 100 episodes, and we appreciate all the support we can get. Okay, and with that, it's time to get into the news. And to do that, we go into the media scrum.
That's why I don't read the newspaper. Because it's garbage.
Ole Miss head coach Pete Golding has finally responded to the tampering allegations leveled by Dabo Sweeney, what feels like months ago. It's been a while. And Pete talked about the recruitment of a linebacker, Luke Farrelly, Cal to Clemson, and then he was enrolled at Clemson, then switched to Ole Miss, and Dabo called out Pete Golding by name and basically all this tampering stuff. So Pete Golding on Tuesday, I believe, says, quote, I mean, obviously, I think there's two sides to every story, right? And so I'm not going to sit up here and use the podium as a grandstand and all that. I mean, that's why there is enforcement. That's why we have a compliance office, right? They do all that. Bottom line on the recruitment of Luke, he came on an official visit prior to the Fiesta Bowl, and I told him, hey, I want you to be our green dot mic. But right now, we have a green dot mic, and that spot's not going to be available until we have one available. End quote. He would then say one came available, and that's how it happened. Not much more detail than that, not that we would expect him to, but David, you've written about this. You've spoken to people at Clemson about this. Any thoughts on first comments? Breaking of the silence.
A very funny response. So bear with me, Chris. So our dog can open our doors. It's very frustrating. He can get in the backyard.
Like a raptor, like it can turn the doorknob?
Yes, it's a problem.
Okay.
So he can open our front door, he can open our back door. It's a big deal if we leave the garage door open or if the front door is open, because he's gotten out in the neighborhood several times. My wife is very obsessive about locking the doors, and sometimes I forget. And so he sounded a little bit like if our dog was running around the neighborhood, and my wife asked me, like, what happens? Like, I'm not going to get into who left doors locked or unlocked or whatever. You know, we got the dog back. There's an enforcement agency for all this. It's a living, breathing, walking. We're all trying to find the guy who did this mean. It's like, if he didn't do it, say he didn't do it. Clearly, this is what happened, and we'll see how this shakes out with the NCAA. I have talked to folks at Clemson about this in the past. They've been pleased with how the NCAA has handled it. In sort of the early investigation, there's no resolution there. But I've heard from so many coaches over the last 2, 3, 4 years since the portal has become a huge part of the sport that they'll have a ton of evidence and they'll turn in evidence to the NCAA and nothing happens. And so Clemson feels like stuff is happening. We'll see where this goes from a resolution, but I wouldn't call it a full-throated defense of his actions. It's kind of just like, we'll see if we get in trouble.
Pretty much, and yeah, we'll see what the NCAA does. These things often can take a while, as we know. And I mean, in terms of penalties, it might be fines or suspensions.
I think that's a level
coach,
2 violation, if I'm not mistaken, like the actual act of tampering. I mean, this
Mhm.
is why, the Big Ten, I think we were on, I forget, I don't think we've talked about this on the show. But the Big Ten put out a statement like where they were saying they need to redo the entire concept of like tampering and penalty. As it is, it's not an enforceable situation. And there's a lot of truth to that because this wasn't an issue.
And as part of that, they said basically a moratorium on penalizing anybody for it.
In the past, yes.
Yeah, which everybody else basically said no, and I don't think it's going anywhere. But yeah.
But I think this has never been an issue. This is not something that it may be a few times in the couple decades I've been covering the sport. But now, I wouldn't call it the issue, but it's a big thing. And I think that there's a lot of, some people are worse violators than others. And I think most coaches are like, listen, if an agent is shopping my players, that's their clients, to other schools, what am I supposed to do about that? There's not much you can do. There's a lot of levels of tampering. But I do think rehashing the rules, stating clearly this is legal, this is not legal, these are the penalties to it. I do think the coaches would probably agree to something if they could get some real rules down. But there's not that, and like I said, it hadn't been a major issue, so the actual penalties for this are pretty small. So I think ultimately what the coaches and the community is looking for with this situation with Golding and Dabo is just some public acknowledgement from the NCAA saying they tampered.
Yeah,
you can't do this. We're going to enforce the penalty because I don't think. I mean, are we counting the Florida State Amarius Mims thing that wasn't really tampering but kind of tampering? I don't remember. We haven't seen it really get in trouble for this, and so one of the biggest names in the sport publicly calling out a coach by name is not something that we have seen a lot. And so it forced the NCAA's hand, and they're investigating. Like I said, Clemson feels pretty good about how it's been handled to this point, but that might change depending on what the resolution looks like.
Along those lines, on Wednesday when we're recording, it hasn't been announced yet. It may pass, but the Division I cabinet is supposed to make a decision on spring transfer penalties. Now, if you remember, there is no spring transfer portal this year. They got rid of it. There was only the one in the winter. And in theory. And so the concern was, do you have more players who do the Xavier Lucas thing, who unenroll at school and then enroll elsewhere like as a walk-on, and then they get on, and that basically the way to get around the portal. And the Football Oversight Committee proposed that if a school adds a transfer who was not in the portal and didn't enter during the window, the head coach of that school would be suspended for 6 games, half the regular season, prohibited from all football activities on and off the field. In addition, schools would be fined up to 20% of their football budget. And originally the proposal had you lose 5 roster spots, but I think they got rid of that part of the proposal. That's supposed to be ruled on today. So by the time you're listening, it will have already passed or not. Let's just say that it does. Those are gigantic penalties. Those are some of the harshest penalties we've seen for anything. And the idea there is the thinking is we can't tell the kids not to unenroll and enroll. You can't do that. They're students. But what you can do is then penalize the school for adding them. And you're not penalizing or suspending the kid or any of this stuff. It's simply about the coaches and the program. Will that be legally challenged if it happens? Probably. But that's they're really, really trying to go hard to get ahead of this to try to prevent there from being a spring portal.
I think it's a smart workaround because I think if the school is not aggressively trying to tamper with guys after spring, then they're not making offers. And it's hard if there's nobody out there shopping. It'd be hard for a player to go to court and say, my NIL value is being limited by this rule, even though it probably is, but proving that it'd be difficult. Again, all of this stuff without a CBA, what does that mean when you legally challenge it? We don't really know. I do think that there will be. I'm going to say the number will be 15 to 20 guys after spring football, after the spring semester, that try to go somewhere else. How that works out, I suspect it will work now. We'll see as the sport evolves, as the rule book evolves. It's hard to say. But Chris, we've had discussions on this pod before. The dirty secret of the portal is that the portal is probably fake, and this is an attempt to make it not fake. And Xavier Lucas exists. That's a pretty strong precedent.
Yes, and that's why it's interesting that the Big Ten had put forth that moratorium on tampering stuff when they are supporting Wisconsin in its lawsuit against Miami, which is still going on. I believe that whole case is still happening. But so if this didn't pass on Wednesday, then oh well, forget what we just said for the last couple of minutes. But if this does pass, that is a gigantic thing to try to get ahead of, because you're going to get out of spring ball. The spring portal is usually guys who find out they're not going to be a starter or they're lower on the depth chart and they want to go somewhere else to play more. You have a couple of different ones, like a Jaden Ott or a couple of guys who leave at the end who go to bigger schools who are starters. But for the most part, it's guys looking for more playing time. And in this case, the idea is they wouldn't do that. And the reason coaches wanted the winter portal and not the spring was they said, we want to go through spring practice with our roster. And so we know who we have and not have to redo this. And that's what they got. So we'll see.
Chris, how many guys go in? How many guys try to switch schools after the spring semester?
I'm going to say 5. I don't think it's going to be a lot. I think we saw like the Damon Williams thing with the Big Ten where someone trying to get out of a contract, it didn't work. It did work with Darian Mensah going from Duke to Miami, but you didn't see a lot of those. And so I'm going to go lower than you. But that could be a big thing come spring. We will see.
I do think the rule, the one window, I don't see a workaround to drag a collective and a school back to the negotiating table. I don't have a lot of pity for the decision makers and power brokers that are holding the money, that are giving it to players. But getting a player in December, paying him, agreeing to a deal, and then ending up back at the negotiating table in April because he wants to go in the portal again or he had a nice spring, that I did feel like, all right,
I think everybody...
Yeah, that sucks. And I think this has successfully nixed that. I don't think we're going to see any of that because I think the threat would be too risky. Possibly
you don't have the
empty.
leverage. You won't have the leverage, theoretically, to go somewhere else. So there's that. Other new rules. This happened a couple weeks ago, but we weren't around on the show to talk about it. On-field rules. We got a couple of these, 3 of these. One that didn't happen. David, I'll get your opinion. Targeting. There will no longer be a carryover suspension if you get a targeting penalty in the second half of a game. This has happened, it happens quite a bit. Targeting the second half, you miss the first half of the next game. They're getting rid of that for a 1-year experiment to see how it goes. Basically, targeting, 15-yard penalty, you're ejected. That's it. I think this makes a lot of sense. There are stiffer penalties for repeat offenders. If you get 2, it does carry over. If you get 3, you miss the whole next game. But there was nobody last year who even got 3. Very few people even got 2. And that's the reason they got rid of this. They said people are learning from the first time. That's why we think we can get rid of that. Makes sense to me. I like that change.
Yeah, I like it too. I just think the severity of that penalty, I mean, it's like flipping a coin, You do that in the second half against Louisiana Monroe, and you've got, a major divisional conference game the next week. And it's like, that's a massive, massive deal if you're going to miss your starting safety for the first half of the game. Or a guy does it, in that game, with 4 minutes left, and he's going to miss, an FCS bye game the next week. It's like, the penalty, it was too random. So, yeah, I liked it.
It happened in the championship game. The championship game. Xavier Lucas, targeting in the second half against Ole Miss, missed the first half against Indiana. He's all over this episode. But they didn't love that. I think that's good. For the people who keep asking, why not do 2 tiers? Do a yellow card, red card, flagrant 1, flagrant 2.
I get asked this all the time.
They don't want to do that. There's no support for doing that because they don't want to lessen what is determined to be targeting, because they are worried, for one, if someone comes at them with a head injuries lawsuit, you can say, hey, they're pulling back on the severity. No, they want to have that consistent. And 2, referees have told me they are worried that if you have the option for a flagrant 1, flagrant 2, you're probably going to call flagrant 1 most of the time and not eject a guy. And because you have that, it becomes more of a burden to give the guy the harsher penalty. And so it's that ejection that gives the rule the teeth is the phrase that they say.
Yeah, I think this is one of those. It's similar to a lot of the rules that are governing college sports right now. People know it doesn't really make sense, but there's legal reasons why it's not going to happen. Because I do think it seems pretty obvious. Like when a guy's headhunting, it's pretty obvious. I don't think we see a ton of that.
No, we don't. It has worked.
That's versus the guy coming in for a tackle and the guy ducks and it is targeting. I feel bad for the kid, but like obviously I think most people would agree that it makes sense to have it, but there's a pretty obvious reasons why it's not going to happen.
The targeting rule has worked. Like you watch clips from the 2000s and jacked up and all that stuff, and it's like difficult to go back and watch sometimes. So it has worked. There are fewer targeting penalties per game according to the numbers. So I know people are very annoyed by what is and isn't targeting. I think adding more subjectivity to that would make it even harder. So small change, but I think it's a good change. Another change, offensive pass interference is now only 10 yards instead of 15 yards. This matches the NFL. I think it's also a good rule because offensive pass interference is usually just an illegal block. You know, it's not offensive pass interference when it's 15 yards and you get that, it kills a drive. Like the chances of a drive doing anything are pretty much dead at that point. So lessen it a little bit so you don't kill an offense for an illegal block. I think that's a small thing that makes sense.
Yeah, I like it.
Another one, fair catch kick, where if you fair catch a punt or a kickoff, I think, you can attempt a field goal or a drop kick from there. This would typically come into play on like the last play of a half or something like that. It is the case in the NFL. It's a case in high school where you actually do see it quite a bit because guys don't punt so well. Small thing, but makes sense. Keep an eye on that. And then the last thing, the biggest thing to me, they did not pass the rule on short shorts and pants.
I don't know. I don't know what's going on with this.
They had proposed the rule that you had to cover up your entire leg from the top of your shoes all the way to your pants, like the NFL does it. This is because you have players wearing biker shorts out there. Tate Sandell, the kicker at Oklahoma. Byron Brown, I think, was doing it last year too. The rule already is that the knee pad has to go over, the pants have to go over your knee. That just hasn't been enforced because nobody's been willing to kind of do it. So they proposed, you got to cover your whole leg, like the NFL. It didn't pass. I don't know why it didn't pass. I talked to some people who were very surprised and couldn't believe it didn't pass. But if you like seeing thighs, you may continue to see those.
This is an epidemic. I've been around some practices since this spring. It's spreading. I mean, this is a matter of time. It's only going to be more players. I don't get this. Maybe it's a Gen Z thing. Maybe we're too old, Chris. But I don't get this. This has not been a thing. I never minded in the 80s and 90s the like ab jerseys. I feel like those,
which is also not allowed.
Tough.
Those were banned like 10 years ago, but
yeah, they have successfully eliminated that from the sport, which I actually didn't really like. I thought it was kind of cool, but the pants thing, I don't know what's going on with this, but I feel like it's going to spread this year, and I think they're going to force their hand because I'm telling you, when I go out to practices, 30%, 40%, I'm like, these are illegal pants. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I know it's just a practice, but still.
And the reason is partly they say there's a safety thing. You need your leg pad lower. Also, mostly they just don't like how it looks. And I do think it looks kind of weird. But if you like the thighsman, you're going to continue to get that. Elsewhere, a couple weeks ago, also didn't talk about it, but Donald Trump issued an executive order on the Army-Navy game protecting that TV window on the second weekend of December for the game. Executive orders do not have any actual legal power. They're just for executive branch, parts of the executive branch, but Army and Navy supported this. Trump said, back in January, he was going to do this. It just adds to the attention on the expansion of the college football playoff. Because if you expand it, you're going to have to move into that second weekend of December. And Army Navy's that weekend. There's some bowl games that weekend now because everything's gotten moved up. But that window is that's there. That remains one of the many logistical hurdles under CFP expansion. But any thoughts?
This is interesting to me, Chris. So I sat down with Dave Doran at NC State yesterday, and we talked about a lot of stuff. But one of the things that he mentioned that I hadn't really heard was, there's a lot of support obviously for moving the season up to week 0. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But he said that when their bowl games have been later, they've had like between 10 and 12 opt-outs because guys' agents are telling them, hey, you need to be healthy for these college all-star games, the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl. It's not about like suffering a catastrophic injury like a Jalen Smith. It's like, oh, if you tweak an ankle or something, like it's going to affect your prep. Like you can make a lot of money at the Shrine Bowl, at the Senior Bowl. And he said this year they played their bowl game, I think it was December 18th or 19th. It was really, really early. And they had like 1 or 2 opt-outs. And he's like, I think if you have earlier bowl games, if you move these minor bowl games much earlier, you sort of accidentally fix bowl season. I think you're going to have way, way fewer opt-outs. I'm not 100% sure that that's true, and I hadn't really thought about it, but it's an interesting like side effect that I had not considered because, as the season, I hear this a lot from teams that make it to the Final Four in the 12-team playoff era. Ohio State's guys were complaining about this a ton at the national championship last year, is that they couldn't go to any of these all-star games, and they couldn't go to like it was affecting their combine prep. And nobody cares about these all-star games, but you can make a lot of money at those games. If you go to the Senior Bowl and you dominate in practice, you can go from, middle of the 3rd round to late 1st rounder, middle 2nd rounder, which is a lot of money. And they didn't have that opportunity. And I do wonder if you do move things up, and we'll see what happens with Army Navy. Like if that's a decent fix for bowl season. It's an interesting idea.
So, like I said, like the last 2 years since we've gone to a 12-team playoff, we have had bowl games that night after Army Navy. This year it was Boise, Washington, which was the Washington blowout.
Terrible game. I watched 10 minutes of it.
and so we did move bowl games up because we're trying to get more of them in before the playoffs. So that's kind of unrelated to Army Navy because if you expanding the playoff affects going backwards on the calendar. It doesn't impact the back end in terms of quarterfinals, New Year's Day, championship, all that stuff. So they're kind of 2 different things. That takes us into the second thing, which you mentioned there, but let's just talk about it now. Moving up to week 0, the weekend before Labor Day, as the starting date for college football. This has been in discussion by the Oversight Committee for a while now, a couple of months. Georgia's AD is the chair of the subgroup working on that. There's a lot of different things that they're discussing about the calendar, one of which is spring practice. Do you change it to NFL OTAs? They may do that. But moving up the season to week 0 could start as soon as 2027. And the reason is actually not at all to do with the college football playoff or the postseason. It's simply that we're going back to years in which you only have 1 bye on the schedule for college football. The last 2 years we've had 2 byes. It's just based on where Labor Day falls on the calendar. It determines how long it goes. And so now we're going back to, you have 13 weeks to play 12 games. That's very difficult for schools scheduling and conferences that are so big trying to figure things out. So the proposal here is you start at week 0 in those years in which you would only have 1 bye, because that way you would uniformly have 14 weeks to play 12 games. That makes the scheduling a lot easier. I think it makes a lot of sense. I do worry a little bit, like Labor Day as the start of college football is like a really nice thing.
You get that 5 days of football. Could you do that in week 0 still? Could you? I don't know why you couldn't, but it wouldn't be as helpful for fans. Like a Sunday night game, a Monday night game would be tough to get to.
There's no NFL to compete with. You could still do a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, maybe Sunday. You probably wouldn't do a Monday because it wouldn't be a holiday. But so that's something to keep in mind. I think it would make sense. It's again, this isn't about the championship game happening in late January. That's a completely separate issue. This is the start of the season and basically making schedules more doable. Frankly, I think 2 byes is good, especially if you are going to expand the playoff and move things up and have fewer byes on the back. And having 2 byes in the regular season, I think, is really helpful as well. This also impacts, by the way, like the NFL. They're going to go into negotiations with players pretty soon. The NFL wants 18-game regular season with 2 byes, which would extend the NFL season, probably help college football really in terms of how to make that calendar work. So some interesting stuff there. We got a story on it. I'll link to it in the show notes. Speaking of the college football playoff, we have 3 new committee members. Gus Malzahn, former Auburn head coach, UCF head coach, a few other places.
Fellow Northwest Arkansan.
That's right. Jeff Tedford, the former Fresno State and Cal head coach, and Louisiana AD Brian Maggard. And Hunter Yurachek was extended another year as the chair. I think it's interesting to add 2 more coaches. This will be a 13-member committee. It's supposed to be 13. Many times it's 12 because people have to back out, but a couple extra coaches in there, more than normal. David, you wrote about this when it happened, but I think those are guys that make sense, guys that are relatively recent in the sport as well. So, like, they kind of know what's going on.
I still think if you want to stay above reproach, I would support booting all active ADs off of the committee. I think it's a bad idea. I think you should bring in like an analytics voice, whether that's Bill Connolly, whether that's whoever, like somebody that has a real good understanding of the advanced numbers that can tell you a lot in college sports. I think would be good. I just think it gets complicated with sitting ADs, and that's like half of the committee. It's like half the committee. So we'll see, but pretty standard picks. 2 retired coaches that are not that retired, another AD. I know people were mad about Hunter Yurachek. I mean, everybody hates the chairman. It's a thankless job. Whatever. I don't care about this.
Here's the thing. And I talked to someone at the playoff about this recently. So much of it is just simply the communication. Like the way Keith Gill, the Sun Belt commissioner, who was the chair of the NCAA basketball selection committee, the way he explained Miami of Ohio in, Auburn out, why we did that, was like very just straightforward. And I thought a very much breath of fresh air. He wasn't making 6-7 jokes and do it like Hunter Yurachek was doing and doing all the stuff with Reese Davis. It was just very just like by the books. Here's what we thought. Here's why. And when we did this, we did that. It's like, that's all we're looking for. I think, and you notice you didn't hear Keith Gill say anything like, as we watch the games, we love the way that they, defend the paint. You get that all the time with the chair, which is like, we love the defense. They try so hard to show that they know ball by saying things like, well, we love the way that they do this. It just opens them up to more criticism, I think. And so you got to get, I know the playoff wants to kind of work on how they do that communication with the chair and Reese, and also kind of, because basketball does what, 2 or 3 of those like net reveals, but it's like the top 16 teams.
Yeah, I don't think they do. I don't know. It's so pointless because the field is so big and they only show like 16. I know they do one where they show the 16. I don't think they do a second, but maybe they do and I just missed it. But
so it's like, there's been talk, do they adjust the number of shows they do with the ESPN because the drama of Notre Dame being in and then out despite neither of Miami or Notre Dame playing, that created that problem. And because there's so many of these, because they rank so many teams, 25, the committee put themselves in a very difficult situation. Basketball doesn't have to deal with that as much, and partly because the field is so big. So I know they kind of want to work on some of that stuff, but some new people on the chair to get mad at, if that's your thing.
The one thing I'd keep an eye out for on the committee this year immediately is we're coming up on league meetings season. There's a lot of momentum to change tiebreakers to because of the situation in the ACC last year and
they will.
Yes, I believe that they will. But then that poses a problem of waiting until Tuesday to figure out who your championship participants are. And so I think that there is some conversation, some questions about could they move the penultimate rankings also to Sunday to give these teams some. That's sort of down the line. You got to pass the rule first, but I think most people would agree that it's untenable to be sitting there for 2 days waiting to figure out who your conference champions are. And the committee meetings would be, I think, pretty easy to move. They already do it. So doing 2 on Sunday and the rest on Tuesday may happen, but I think I would be kind of surprised if we don't get to that. Maybe not this year, but soon.
Elsewhere, 2 more players suing the NCAA for eligibility. Virginia quarterback Chandler Morris, Oklahoma linebacker Owen Heineke. Both of these are kind of interesting for different reasons. Chandler Morris, who has already played, I think, like 6 years of college football. He's been around for a long time. But in 2022, the year that TCU played for the national championship, he started the first game, got hurt. Max Duggan comes in and goes on a run. Morris came back, played a couple of games of mop-up duty, and he wants a medical redshirt for that year on mental health grounds, which is kind of a new way to do it. It's a little bit different than Trinidad Chambliss asking for something else. And then Owen Heineke, his is unique because he started his college career as a walk-on lacrosse player at Ohio State. Then he transferred to Oklahoma, missed a year with a knee injury, then plays the next 3 seasons. And it's different than like a Greg Paulus going from football to lacrosse or the guys who go play baseball. Because the idea here is that Owen Heineke's NCAA clock started when he did lacrosse at Ohio State. You get 5 years to play 4. He has had 5 years, and so he has to get a 6th year. And he's saying, hey, this lacrosse, couple of games of lacrosse shouldn't count. I wanted to walk on football at Ohio State, but they wouldn't because of COVID. It's a unique situation. So both of them are like kind of different. Obviously, Chandler Morris took Virginia to the ACC championship game last year. Heineke was a second-team All-SEC linebacker. Who knows with the way these things go? Some of these work, some of them don't. But Trinidad Chambliss won on the grounds that the NCAA has to operate in the best interest of players. We'll see. But David, do you have any thoughts on either of those guys?
2 things on this. So one, I think the thing that not enough people are talking about with the situation with Chandler Morris is if he does win this waiver, he may not be playing at Virginia. You may have a pretty good quarterback on the market. Virginia already took Bo Perbula. They also took Eli Holstein, the Pitt transfer, who came from Alabama. I think he started at Alabama, went to Pitt.
Yeah.
They got 2 pretty viable options. And I think, you're assuming that Chandler is done there. And, you bring in 2 really good quarterbacks that are P4 level starters. I'm sure they're spending a lot of money on Bo Perbula to grab him. So what happens to Chandler Morris if he does win this case is really interesting. It should be noted that the Clemson quarterback situation is not the greatest. They have, Chris Vannini, and a young kid, and their new OC, Chris.
And do you know who the new offensive coordinator is at Clemson? That would be Chad Morris.
Chad Morris, who spent last year as a Virginia super fan, not working in football, following them around, watching Chandler play. I think both of them would love to have that. Certainly, Chad Morris, what he thinks goes a long way with Dabo. So this might have a pretty strong impact on what next season looks like. For me personally, with the waivers and all of this stuff, it's very hard to know what of these is legitimate and what of these is trying to game the system. And I don't want to dig into it and say that's fake, that's real. I think there's a lot of momentum in the sport to remove some of this sort of lack of certainty. We talk about this coming off of AFC. This is why a lot of people want to see the 5-for-5 situation. But again, like most rule changes in college football, you open yourselves up to lawsuits if you do that. So these are situations where I don't think you're going to have an uproar if players win these suits and go. I think bringing NFL players, bringing NBA players back was a step too far for fans. Fans really rejected that, the Charles Bediako situation.
And the courts.
It held up and the courts rejected that as well. I think people did not want to see that. So I don't feel super strongly about these. But I think the lack of certainty is not good for anybody.
I think with Chandler Morris too, he's actually asking for a 7th year. He has played at 4 different schools across 6 years of college football. Oklahoma, TCU, North Texas, Virginia. He has started 35 games, most of those the last 2 years at North Texas and Virginia. So it's one of those all right, I in mental health grounds, I can't speak to that. But that guy has played a lot of college football. So I think those are the ones that kind of make fans a bit uneasy. So we will see. David, you, like you mentioned, have visited a handful of schools the last week or so. Wanted to give you a chance to kind of run down any, not to spoil the stories you're going to write, but any takeaways you have from the handful of places you've visited around the Carolinas.
Yeah, it's been nice to get out. I'm going to a few more. We won't spoil where else I'm going, but I was at NC State yesterday. I went to South Carolina a week ago, working on a bunch of different stuff there. But I came away kind of pretty relatively bullish, for both of those places. I think with South Carolina, they were a lot closer than I think people recognized last year, and held on to, their key pieces.
I mean,
I think
like South Carolina is this close to beating Alabama and Texas A&M.
I would argue closer than that to beating Texas A&M. They were up,
Yeah.
I think it was 63 at halftime and lost that game. So, Shane Beamer, actions speak louder than words. Punting on the Mike Shula experience and leaning into the Baylor offense, bringing in Kendall Briles. I think it's a pretty good fit for Lenore Sellers. But they keep Sellers. They keep Dylan Stewart. And they keep CFB Media Dynasty Heisman Trophy winner Nick Harbor. So that's a huge piece. I will say, so I'm trying to, these are talking about it's tough because I don't want to steal things that I'm going to use for stories. I don't think this is going in a story, but I was talking to one of their staffers about Dylan Stewart, and obviously a pretty special player, but he was telling me that they have, they do these kettlebell drills with the strength staff. And he said, like, you swing it up and then you bring him down and then you do a squat. And he said Dylan basically can get all the way down to where his butt is like a half an inch off the ground in a squat. And the strength staff, like when he was doing it, was like looking around like, what is happening? Like, this is not possible. And you hip bend, you couldn't find a more valuable trait for an edge rusher like Dylan Stewart, who is big and strong, but man, that bend is wild. And I think he's a guy that's poised to have a big year. Last year, just their offense let him down in a lot of spots, and they've brought in a bunch of new offensive linemen. I think they're pretty excited about that. They brought in Randy Clements along with, with this offense, usually paired with a offensive line coach when you bring him in. So I think there's some upside there. North Carolina State as well. CJ Bailey, really good player. I went to their practice yesterday. He's the guy that I like. They lose Hollywood Smothers, two of their two best receivers as well. But they bring in JoJo Trader, which is interesting. And Davion Geis, the kid from UNC. All three of these guys used to play together at Miami in prep football back in the day. And they're all, without actually, meeting together at Miami, are back on the same team and know each other. And they're a team I think can make a little bit of noise. But I'll be writing about those visits in the future. So it's good to get out in the spring, man. It's football season. What can I say?
It is. I went up to Oklahoma a couple weeks ago, planning some other trips myself. We'll talk about those.
I have at least one more. No, two. I have two more that I'm going on in the next couple weeks, and then going to SEC meetings. That's not for another month or two. So
it's great for you to live by a bunch of schools now compared to when you were in Knoxville and there wasn't like that.
Yeah, there was like a lot of schools that were relatively close in Knoxville, but nothing that I could get down and back in a day super easily, which I've been able to do, and it's been fun. And I've been getting around the state of North Carolina, getting up close and personal with Highway 85. So
I was in your neighborhood, by the way, yesterday. I flew back. My flight was supposed to be from Mobile to Dallas. It got moved from like a 10 a.m. to like a 5 a.m. I was like, I'm not doing that.
That's not great.
So I took a flight from Mobile to Charlotte to Dallas, which was fine.
Did you wave?
I was briefly, and I was when I was over on the plane, I was waving.
I will say, a Charlotte, very bad connection airport. Did you have to walk 1 or 2 miles to your second plane?
Yeah, it's quite a bit. It was fine for me. My brother, his plane to Detroit kept getting delayed. He ended up waiting in the airport like 8 hours. I felt really bad for him.
Well, because Charlotte's not a bad airport to be stuck in for 8 hours, all things considered. But they used to have a PGA Tour, not to be a Golden Tee heavy, but they used to have a PGA Tour shop that had a Golden Tee machine for free in there. And if I ever got you connect in Charlotte all the time. And if I had to get stuck there for 2 or 3 hours, I'd get, squeeze in an 18 if I didn't have a bunch of work to do. So
only a couple things left here. This one I wanted, kind of a personal feeling I've been having. Instead of just tweeting it, I figured I'd talk about it on the podcast. NFL owner meetings this week. And you've probably seen it if you've turned on ESPN at all week. They're out there in Arizona. Pat McAfee's got his whole thing set up. You see all the things. And it's just a reminder, like, the NFL is so good at keeping itself in the news and giving you a reason to talk about it all the time. And college football is terrible at this. And they always have been. Spring meetings are all separate. Every conference does their own. They're all over the place, all these different times. There was a good stretch where like 6 or 7 conferences used to meet in Phoenix for their meetings, and everybody would do it together, and there was like a Fiesta Bowl golf thing. But then kind of after COVID, that went away. The Big Ten went off to do its own thing. Others split off. Maybe there was too much media kind of showing up at the hotel, but we used to like going to that. It was a great place to go. Like, I think the SEC does a good job of making Destin like a good event. You have Feinbaum there. You have good media access. Like, that's a good deal.
Yeah.
ACC is like, okay. Big 12 wants more people to try to come to it. Like, Big 10, though, they did theirs like almost in secret last year. No announcements, no nothing. A couple media went, but didn't really talk to anybody. Nobody was made available. It continues to be the Big 10's, I think, really poor PR planning and stuff like that. But like, it's like the same thing I feel at the playoff or like the Super Bowl. Everybody comes in for 2 weeks and just like promotes the NFL. And college football is just so scattered all the time. It just feels like a missed opportunity if you had all the conferences together for like a week and a bunch of media would come in. You'd have these set moments where you would talk to media and you could push narratives and have debates and get through stuff. And instead, it's just so scattershot. And I think that the sport is worse off for it.
Even if you didn't have one big group, what is the reason why, like, FS1 couldn't just set up their desk in LA or wherever the Big Ten's doing their meetings this year and roll the coaches through, put the coaches on national television, talk about your team? You know, I do think like Feinbaum does a pretty good job of that in Destin and the SEC, but it's still the SEC network. Like ESPN, you know, if you just watch ESPN for the week, unless one of the coaches pops off about something, which they do, you know, you're not going to get a ton of attention. But the SEC meetings is a great event. They limit it to a smaller amount of media, so it's way more functional than media days, which is kind of pointless to even go to. You know, a lot of the coaches bring their families. The ADs are there, associate ADs are there, because there's a bunch of meetings about a bunch of different stuff, and people's hair is down a little bit, and it's a good event to go to because everybody's in one spot. So, yeah. I think you're right. The Big Ten, last year especially, you know, when they're trying to pitch this playoff plan and everybody's in Destin, you know, in the SEC, like firing away at it. The Big Ten is not saying anything. It's a problem.
That destroyed the Big Ten's 16-team playoff plan because the SEC created news at its meetings and the coaches kind of went off about it. Like, that's good. That's good for the sport that you can just like create talking points and things that a lot of people can rally around, as opposed to, oh, the intel's telling me the freshman quarterback's looking good in practice. Like there's a limited audience for that. I think
the issue with the Big 12s forever has been they don't bring the coaches, which like that's the most famous person on your campus, basically.
They did,
and you're going to get more media. I think they've switched that recently, haven't they?
Yes, they did it last year. I went. It was in Orlando. I did it with the EA Sports thing. All the coaches were there. This year, they're doing it later in the year, but they're going to have all the football and basketball and do it all in one. So I'm going to be there. It's here in Dallas. So they want media to like come to that, which is what you should be doing. You should be trying to kind of promote your sport, but it'd be great if the sport could do it as a whole. Like those couple of years in Phoenix, I don't know if you ever went, but like me and Nicole, Max Olson would go a lot. It was just a great place to kind of see people in a relaxed setting and make news, but also is what it is. All right, we're going to last bit of the news segment. It's not really news, but I felt the need to address the situation about Duke basketball because I wrote a story about a week ago that Duke basketball had become less hateable over the years. This wasn't just me saying this. I talked to Bomani Jones, preeminent Duke hater. We got some Brendan Marks, our colleague, talked to a Duke assistant coach who said, yeah, it's not the same as it used to be. Talked to Jay Billis about it. And everybody who replied to the story said, no, blah, blah, blah. And then, David, Duke lost on Sunday.
They did?
In the most shockingly, unbelievably funny if you hate Duke way possible, when up to they Instead of getting fouled or something, they tried to pass the ball out, turned it over. UConn hits a 3, and UConn wins. And everybody starts tweeting at me, saying I can't say anything about Duke because they lost. I said people don't hate Duke. You agreed. You say you agreed with my story at the time, but now you don't after the. So before I start to defend myself a bit, you come at me.
Okay, so I think culturally, on the average day, I think you're probably right. I don't think that Duke inhabits nearly as much of the real estate of the average college sports fan, especially come March Madness time.
And here are the reasons why. Wait. And here are the reasons. The reasons that were in the story that were not just from me, it's from other people. One is they haven't won a championship in 11 years now. They've only made 2 Final Fours since then. They're not winning as much. Like, they're not there every year like they used to be. 2, Coach K is gone. He was the guy who had a lot of the attention. And even people who didn't agree with the story agreed with that point. And 3 is that the one and dones, like, you don't have players you grow to hate anymore. Grayson Allen was kind of the last one. There isn't a JJ Redick, a Leitner, or stuff like that. So that was part of the reasoning behind it. But go ahead.
Also, they've had some cool players like Cooper Flagg, Zion, fun players to watch.
People like those one and dones, like Cooper Flagg. Yeah. Like, you would have thought, white guy at Duke, he's the guy you hate, but people just liked him and
he doesn't play a hateable brand of basketball.
No,
either.
no, and so.
But anyway,
a lot of people didn't read the story, just read the headline or just read the graphic that went with the thing.
On the internet. They did this.
Yeah,
they didn't read the story. They just read the headline and they tweeted at you based on.
But you did. So I will take it from you.
I did. I forgot how entertaining it is on the internet when Duke loses in spectacular fashion. I don't particularly care that much about Duke. I also live much closer to them now. I respect them as an institution, not from an educational standpoint, but just that they're a thing. But the content when Duke loses is tremendous. I forgot the nationwide party that ensues. And we've seen it kind of 2 years in a row. But last year, it was late at night. I just didn't see as much, but people seem to enjoy the coughing up the lead against Houston. But this was kind of another level because it just seemed, in the words of Bill Raftery after that game, utterly impossible. I watched that whole game and it was UConn was kinda in it, but not really. They were.
Duke was up 19. It was 15 points.
Yeah, they were never they got it to 5 with 4 minutes left, and even then it was but they're not going to get the job done here. And then they were out of it. Never really got back to equilibrium, and then all of a sudden, Caden Boozer throws a inadvisable pass that it led to what it led to.
So. It's different when Duke loses. Especially in a way like that. It still is for a lot of people. And I texted Bomani Jones after that happened. I said, "How you feeling?" He said, "If I gave you the details, I'd be embarrassed." So he's talked about it on his show. He had a lot of fun. And people. But here's the thing. Here's what I would say, David. Everyone who just read the headline or just a graphic and responded. If you remember JJ Redick playing at Duke, if you remember Christian Leitner, maybe if you even remember Grayson Allen, this isn't about you. You have the reason to hate Duke. The point that the story was mostly about, and the point that Bomani Jones made, him ranting on him talking about it on his show gave me the story idea, is that the younger people don't know that. They didn't grow up with that. They haven't grown up with Duke dominating, where Duke's the only team on television, where you have someone like Grayson Allen or JJ Redick or Christian Leitner stomping on somebody, and you have Dickie V and everybody in the media saying Duke does it the right way, and Duke's all these different things that are 100% mostly the reason that people hate Duke. But Duke basketball isn't that anymore to a lot of people, and especially a lot of young people. And I maintain that but the story that everybody said aged poorly after that game, I think it might actually age even better in the long run because of this. Because yes, everybody celebrates Duke and it was great, but we haven't seen Duke win a championship in 11 years. And you kind of need them to be at a higher perch in order for them to fall even further and appreciate that loss even more. So I stand by the story, obviously, for what it was. But I thought Bomani Jones, and I ended the story with this quote from Bomani Jones that I thought was fantastic, and it's kind of everything I think about with sports right now. And Bomani was basically saying hating Duke is ultimately it's about having fun. And he says, quote, "It's having these characters where these games are something that you feel, not just something that you bet on, not just something that becomes a test of your ability to prognosticate what's going to happen in a basketball game. No, man, this stuff is supposed to be about feeling. That's where it's at its best. I think there are a lot of us who forgot how much fun it was to hate Duke. It's a great time. It's okay to go ahead. It's okay to go ahead and bring it back. Give them credit when they win or don't give them credit when they win. I don't care, but it's more fun that way. We have gotten so quantitatively invested in a number of ways when it comes to sport that we ignore that. No, the fun of this is just to be somewhat irrational." And ultimately, the point of the story was that hating Duke is good. That it's good that that hating Duke is good. That it's sports are supposed to be about that, not something that you bet on, not your bracket being right. And the fandom of hating Duke is ultimately what it's all about. So for all you people who didn't read the story, please get down to the end of it, because that was the ultimate point. And but man, that was a pretty wild way to finish that game. That was nuts.
That was the best game of the tournament. I mean, that we wrote about it right after as a staff, kind of the most memorable buzzer beaters.
I came in from vacation to contribute on that.
Yeah, and that's gonna go. I mean, that's an all timer. I mean, I'm trying to. I didn't really think about ranking them necessarily, but it's probably top 10 easily.
It is, but it's so well. It's not the Final Four of the championship, so it's a little bit different there. But it's also different because they had the game won. It's not like just someone hit a crazy buzzer beater.
And they had dominated the whole game. Like the idea that UConn could win that game at basically any point feels almost impossible. Because that game was Duke. They didn't just have that game won. Duke controlled that game for 39 minutes and 58 seconds.
My bracket, by the way, was doing incredible up to that point. I would have had 3 Final Four teams, both title teams, if Duke had won. But their incredible collapse killed my bracket. But you know what? It's worth it because it's fun to watch Duke lose, and it's fun to see a crazy thing happen, and I enjoyed it. All right, before we wrap up, we're going to make a couple of quick picks here for basketball.
Heartbreak City!
We got 2 Final Four games, Illinois versus UConn, Michigan versus Arizona. My picks, I'm going to go Illinois, and I'm going to go Arizona. Meet in the championship game. David, what are your picks?
I'm going to go UConn and Arizona meeting in the championship game, and I'm going to stick with my bracket. Arizona, I thought they were the best team coming in. I've seen nothing to dissuade me from that notion. I didn't think they'd be this popular of a title pick. It was pretty much either Arizona or Duke. I haven't seen a lot of other schools. If you had shown me, like doing the brackets, if you'd shown me the breakdown, which you never really know until it starts, I probably would have picked Michigan just to play the numbers game. But I think Arizona's the best team, and I think they proved that this weekend.
I mean, Charles Barkley's been calling this the Arizona Invitational for the last couple of weeks. So
yeah,
his pick's still in there.
It's a complete team. Inside game, post game, shooting, experienced guard play. Like there is no real weakness on that team. I don't think they're completely unbeatable. And if somebody's going to do it, it's obviously going to be Michigan. I think it's the second best team. But there's a lot of talk about, the actual championship game is the late game on Saturday. And to some degree, I think that's true. But I picked UConn to beat Duke in that game because of the championship DNA. And I do wonder if getting on that stage, like UConn still has so many guys that have played in so many big games. And the idea that Alex Caravan could be a 3-time national champion, I believe would be the first time probably since the UCLA dynasty, I'm assuming. So
probably something like that. I'm going to go Arizona as well. I think Michigan and Arizona are the 2 best teams here.
Yeah.
Whoever wins that game, I think, is going to win the championship, but should be pretty good. And while we were recording, the D1 cabinet did approve those rules we mentioned earlier in the show for ghost transfers, is what they're calling them. If you sign somebody who didn't go into the portal, and this applies for all sports, not just football, but it's head coach suspended 50% of the season, fined 20% of that sport's budget. It applies to all transfers on or after February 15th of this year, so it's retroactive. So that has indeed passed. What we said earlier on the show all applies. Extremely strict. Okay, and with that, we're going to end the show the way we always do, and that is by remembering some guys.
It's better than this. Guys being dudes.
I'm going to go with Austin Reed, former West Florida, Western Kentucky quarterback who is now playing for the Dallas Renegades of the UFL, which just had their opening weekend last weekend, and he threw for 376 yards and 3 touchdowns. So shout out to him. A couple of years ago, I wrote a story about him because he had declined. He had turned down NIL money, some big NIL money to stay at Western Kentucky back in the day. And his coach, by the way, in the UFL, Rick Neuheisel, who we might try to get on the show at some point to talk a little UFL, but Austin Reed.
I feel like the UFL should lean into guy remembering, because you look at some of these rosters, and that's like for 5-something years now since, the AAC or whatever, the AAF and the UFL and the XFL. I look down the rosters, and it's a guy remembering paradise. But I'm going to go a little bit older. I'm going to go Sidney Rice in honor of my visit to South Carolina. One of the best contested ball catchers I have ever seen in college football. Very good player. 2,000-yard seasons, 2 double-digit touchdown seasons. Very hard to do as a young player, and just a very fun wide receiver. South Carolina's had like a kind of crazy run of big time talents, and even at receiver, Alshon Jeffrey, some of those guys. But Sidney Rice, we remember you. Great player.
Great one. And we got one from John K on Spotify, who submits Eric Anders, former linebacker at Alabama. And John says, because he just retired from the UFC, wanted to remember Anders. Anders? I'm not sure. Best known for his forced fumble on Garrett Gilbert in the 2009 BCS Championship. I had no idea he was a UFC fighter. And indeed, he won a fight on March 14th. He won the fight by unanimous decision and retired from mixed martial arts competition. He finishes with a career record of 18-9 with 1 no contest. And he ended with he started with a huge, he started fighting in 2015. He won his first 10 fights and kind of was up and down, but he ends with a win. So great one there from John K.
More importantly, Chris, Wikipedia tells me that in 2022, he made his acting debut as Vicente the Wolf Gonzalez in the 2nd episode of season 5 of the Netflix series Cobra Kai, which I enjoyed for about 2.5 seasons, and then it got too ridiculous, too many switching sides, too outrageous. I quit on Cobra Kai about 2.5 seasons in. But the first season I did enjoy. But yeah, about halfway through the 3rd season, I was like, all right, I'm out of all of this. Terrible.
How many guys do you think, I'm looking at his Wikipedia, how many guys do you think have on their resume BCS national champion and UFC fight of the night honor? Can't be many.
Not many.
That's a great one from John. By the way, we are pretty much out of nominations. So if you are listening to this, send them to bunchformationpod@gmail.com. We need some more listener nominations for Remember Some Guys. That'll do it here. Thank you for everybody who kind of waited with us through some vacation time, through some basketball time, but we're back in on football. We'll be back to the normal, should be back on the normal schedule starting next week, Monday, unless David is out traveling somewhere. But we got some coach interviews coming up, got some themes and spring football stuff to talk about. Looking forward to doing all of that. So for David Ubben, I am Chris Vannini. Thank you for listening and watching Bunch Formation. We will talk to you next week.
And even in the off season, bring back the turnover chain.